there. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I had switched computers and got everything all up and running. Can you guys just let me know in the chat if you're able to hear me? Awesome. Again, I apologize for the delay. I just swapped out my computer for another one, so I think we're good to go. But what I actually wanted to start with, and I promise I'll get through as much material as I can. I do have a colleague that's on who will be able to answer any questions that come through. But the first thing that I wanted to start out with is to get you guys a link to our clinical manual, which is probably where you can find the rest of the information, same things that we're going over today. So I'm gonna go to the marketplace and get you this link. Had all this set up on my other computer, but hey, we'll make it all work. So I'm here in the marketplace and I'm just going to our public section for the CentralReach Trainings Clinical. And what I'm going to give you access to is the CentralReach Clinical Manual. And what that will do, as soon as this loads, and I'll crack open another window as well, what that's going to do for you is give you pretty much all of the training on the entire clinical system. So back in my library, and then I'll send this link in one moment, it's effectively going to give you this. So what we can see here is we've got a syllabus, key terms, pretty much everything related to instructional notes, criterion. But what we're going to be focusing on today is everything here in this task analysis section. So I'm going to crack that open. So what we're going to be talking about, and I will just open this up first, is pretty much every different way that you can set up the task analysis. So first and foremost, we'll talk about whole chains, which just means every step is currently on acquisition. They're all in bold, versus a cross-session prompt fading, where you're working on one step at a time and you're advancing through an entire hierarchy. So you're pretty much fading back that button up until the point of independence. And then we're going to talk about the within session prompt fading as it relates to forward and backward chains. And all that really means for you is one step is currently on acquisition, but it gives you the autonomy to use whatever prompts that you'd like. So I am going to send this link now to everybody. So I'm just going to quick minimize for 1 second, and I will send this all in the chat. So I'll send it to everybody. So it'll give you that access to that. So I'm going to go right to some sessions, and then we'll talk about these. So I've already got a session all prepared for you guys. So I am going to go down to my task analysis section. And what I'll draw your attention to is going to end up being inside of the instructional notes on the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side rather, and it's going to give you the whole spiel about exactly what we're talking about. So in this first option, and we'll go through in linear order, and the super nice thing is these ones right here correspond to all of the options that are in here. So this is the video on how we made the whole chain. This is the video on how we made the systematic prompt fading versus the within session. So if you want to see any of these visuals again, this is a good place to look, and then also viewing this video. So with whole chains, what this will do is it's going to give you the ability to kind of work on every single step. You'll see that all of these are bold. Now in whole chains, we want the learner to be completely independent. So any prompts that are used, we want to consider those to be failed trials. So on the back end, inside of the learning tree, and we'll see this in a second, if I'm scoring any of these prompts, whether I start with independence, those are going to be counted as 100%. Whereas any of these prompts are going to be considered failed trials. Now that option that we've got right here, that's this count prompts as negative. And where that lives on the learning tree, if we crack this open, it's all the way on the bottom of the edit tab. So what that's pretty much going to do is within your criterion, you're able to specify that, hey, anytime I use one of these prompts, consider it to be a failed trial. So let's take a look at the next option. We'll discuss the across session prompt fading, and I'll show you in real time what this looks like. So I'm going to crack open my session again. And what we'll do is we'll open up this across session prompt fading. So the first thing that you'll see is step 1 and 2 are not bold. Those are steps that we've already mastered. And what happens when you master a step is we actually give you the rest of the prompts. So it's saying any prompt in that entire hierarchy that you've used, you'll be able to see here. Now, step 3 is my step that's currently on acquisition. So, typically we're running through all of the steps, but I'll have you guys use your imagination. And what we'll be able to see is on session 1, we're scoring these. Learner was successful at exactly the level we want. We're seeing that the value is considered 100. Now, the only calculation that really matters for the systematic prompt fading is this step that's in bold. Now, what's important, and this is a little bit different than the whole chain, is we want that count prompts as negative unchecked. That's what allows us to fade through these. So on session 1, my learner's successful at the full physical. Session 2, they're successful again. And what we're going to see happen after session 3 is we're going to see this individual prompt fade back. So we're seeing it to partial physical, but let's do a few more. Let's go through the full hierarchy. So what we're going to see is the goal is going to start at full physical, move to partial, move to gestural, then we're going to see an independent phase. And when that happens, once we leave there, we're going to have the user interface change to this because that step is mastered. So I'm going to graph these a few more times and we'll watch these advance. Cool, so we move to gestural. We're going to move to independent in one more. So all of our prompts are gone. Now, presumably at this point, if you're doing the systematic prompt fading, the learner is able to do all of these steps completely independent. So this is testing for the step 3 of, can they do this all on their own? And the moment we can demonstrate that they can, we're going to move to step 4, and then step 3 is going to look just like these, because any of those mastered steps, we're going to give all of the prompts. Now, to draw your attention back to that manual and what we've got, kind of the key is at the top here, but the moral of the story is anything green that's mastered just means it's going to show all in the hierarchy. Any that are current are going to be red, and the untrained, we have an option for those. So we're seeing the same exact thing here, that when something is mastered, we're getting all of them. So there's one more setting that we have the ability to do in the systematic prompt fading. And once we go through, by the way, once we go through the rest of these, you guys will have a chance to see kind of how these are built from the ground up. And then I'll give you some other exemplars of what this programming could really look like using the task analysis. So here on step 4, there's actually an option that's on the bottom in the edit tab as well for task analyses with forward and backward chains. So I'm going to hover over there and we'll take a look. So in these across session prompt fading, you have 2 different options. You have the ability to show the first prompt for all untrained steps or all prompts for untrained steps. And then we have both of these in the data sheet, so you'll be able to see both of them. So scrolling all the way down to the bottom, it's this option right here. Now, we've spoken a little bit about this one before when we're doing the systematic, always keep that unchecked. But what this will do is this is only going to show you the highest level in the prompting hierarchy. So whatever that first option is for all untrained steps versus showing all of them. So when we navigate back to the session, the main difference here, at least what that little checkbox does, is what does your untrained step look like? In this case, we're showing the highest level, or actually we've already made it through the full hierarchy. So this one would show the highest level if we were still on there. So it would still look identical to that. But right inside of here, when we scroll down, we're seeing the difference between these and that. Is that all of the untrained steps show all prompts versus with this option checked, we're only seeing one. So there's one last optional workflow for the task analysis. And what this one does, I call the within session prompt fading. Now, it's still systematic in the sense that you're working on one step at a time, but this one is used more so for the clinicians. It gives you a lot more autonomy to only use the prompts that you want, and it doesn't actually force you into using just the prescribed prompt at that moment. So when we open this up, we're going to see something a little bit different. We're going to see that all of the steps currently have all of the prompts. Now, what's nice here, and we're still considering these prompts to be failed, but you're seeing that right here, that's the current step that's on acquisition. And anything that we're scoring right here, those are still going to be considered failed trials. But it just pretty much gives you the ability to score whatever level you want for the current step, as opposed to the prescribed one. That's the main difference there. And then kind of comparing these, same thing that we saw up here, it's the all prompts versus first prompt, but again, this is just for the untrained steps. So when I crack this one open, what we've got is you'll see that all of these untrained steps still have that versus the untrained right there. So where I'm going to take you to next is we'll start building out a couple of these, and then I'll take you to a really, really cool place where we'll be able to see a bunch of different uses of the task analysis. And I'll still have you guys on time. I may go into a little bit further towards the 45 minutes, but right on track for where we should be. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to go to a learning tree. So same learning tree that we're in, but let's build out a whole chain, because this one's probably one of the fastest ones that we can do, and then we'll go through and we'll build the rest. So when you're building a whole chain task analysis, we want to choose data collection. I'm going to select whole chain, and then here in the data type, task analysis. Now we'll put in all of our tasks, and you actually want to put these in the terminal order that the skill is actually done. You know, for the forward and backward chains, you may think, oh, I need to put these in reverse, or I need to have them in a regular way, but always with all of the task analyses, you want to put them in the terminal order, the order in which you would do to kind of complete the entire skill. So step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Now, because we're doing the whole chain, we'll keep this as whole. And now when we scroll down here, you're going to see your criterion and prompting settings. Now, the nice thing is if you've been playing around with your criterion, so if you have master criterion templates, like the last webinar that we saw, it's very simple to just go and say, I want to import my template, and it's my physical template, my within session prompt fading. That when I click on this, we're actually all set. So we've got all of our baseline criterion, we've got our intervention criterion. So then when we scroll down here, the main thing that you will need to do is you'll need to say, count these prompts as negative. And what that's going to mean is that whether you're choosing the full physical, the partial physical, gestural, or modeling, and you can always clear out any of these that you don't want if you don't want to use those for the TAs, but you do want to make sure to check this count prompts as negative. And what that's going to do again is fail those trials for anything other than the independent. So I'll hit save as draft, and then I will show you a visual, one that I had prepared before, of an actual whole chain task analysis with true steps. So I will go in here. So you guys will still get a chance to see it. So it's one I had from earlier. So putting on a shirt, whole chain, we crack it open. We have all of our steps currently on acquisition, and the only thing that's going to advance is anything that's independent, because these are all considered to be failed trials. Now, something that we haven't actively covered yet today is what happens in a scenario where you want to run the task analysis again. So very much like with the minimum trial component, or maximum trials rather, with maximum trials, if you ever want to run a task analysis again, you manually graph it, and then it clears, your data have hit the graph now, that you can take data on this again. So that was the whole chain task analysis. The next one that we'll talk about are the systematic prompt fading. And just a reminder, these same videos are in that manual. If you download it, that's the same thing that was sent in chat. So I'm going to make a forward chain task analysis. So when I select forward chain, again, change my data type to task analysis, same exact workflow, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And then when I go into my chaining method, this is where you want to set up forward or backward. Now, the important thing is here, what we're going to end up doing is having the system auto-generate criterion. So it's very important that once you make this setting, you keep it. Because if you had this set up as a forward chain, generated your criterion down here and changed it to backward, your criterion won't actually work. Because what this setting is doing is telling the system what order to put all of your prompts in the criterion settings. So very important, keep the chaining method once you have it set, and if you want it to change to backward, you'll have to clear out the criterion and do that one more time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit new criterion instead of the import template, because forward and backward chains, what this is going to do is say, okay, I have 3 prompt levels. I need my full physical for step 1 before moving to my partial, before moving to my gestural, before moving to independent. So that's why I want to use new criterion. Now, this is the most important part of setting up the systematic prompt fading. What you're doing here is you're saying, what does every step need to look like? So first, I want all of those first levels to be a full physical. That's the only button that I want available at this time. And this is where this workflow diverges from this within session prompt fading. So I'm putting 1 prompt at a time. So I'm going to hit save and add more. And now I want my partial physical. Got it. Save and add more. And now I want my gestural. You can always put as many prompts in here as you want, but just understand that when you're generating this, we're going to end up with each of these prompts multiplied by the steps, each of those multiplied by the steps plus an independent for each. So by nature of me having 3 prompts there, it's going to be 16. You're going to have about 20 steps in there. And my math may be wrong on that. But what I'm going to do is hit save and continue. So now it's going to ask me, what is the criterion for each and every one of those steps? Now with the systematic prompt fading, it's either 100% or 0, because only one step is on acquisition at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if equal to 100%. Now in most cases, with the frame type, because there are so many phases, you may want to be able to advance pretty quickly. That if you were to set up the criterion to run this several times, you may want to consider setting this up to consecutive data points. Because if it was hand washing, you may be running this 3 or 4 times in session, and do we necessarily want a learner to be in one intervention phase for 3 or 4 days when we're testing this multiple times? So you're going to set this criterion value to 100%, because again, it's either 0 or 100. And then we say how many of those consecutive data points do we want. Completely optional for you, but just remember that we're going to have a lot of intervention phases, so the learner is going to have a lot of opportunities to respond. So a lower frame value may be useful. So what I do here is I hit generate criterion. And what's going to happen is the system is now doing all of these calculations, and it spit out all of these phases. So the first thing you'll actually end up doing is you'll end up changing baseline, because this is actually copying that same criterion from all of them. So I'm going to change this one, and I'm just going to say, you know what, if it's equal to 0%, however many times, 3 data points or one trial, really, however you want it set, advance to intervention, which is how that's already set up. So now we've got our baseline being like, if learner isn't successful, advance to intervention. So when I crack open this intervention phase, what we're going to see is we're currently on full physical for step 1, which then eventually goes to partial physical at step 1, gestural at step 1, and then this independent phase, which is how we were able to see these steps kind of advancing from one to the next. So again, to see this again, I'm moving from full physical, and then once I take this one more time, we're going to fade back to the partial physical. So that's what we built there. So the last setting that we've got right here is, making sure that your count prompts as negatives unchecked, because we want the learner successful at that prompt level. And this is where you get to decide, what do I want my untrained steps to look like? Do I want all of the prompts to show, or do I just want the highest level? So just to reiterate, if we go back there, do you want the highest level of prompt showing, or do you want all prompts showing for all of the untrained? Because we can see this is the current one in acquisition, which is just showing one, versus showing all of them. So those are the first 2 types of task analysis. We have one more, and then I'll have a couple moments still to answer any questions that may come. But now, let's build out this within session prompt fading. So same exact workflow as those, but a little bit different with establishing the criterion. So if I put in, let's see, I want to set this one up as the within session prompt fading. For the task analysis, step 1, 2, 3. Cool. Again, changing our method to be either the forward or the backward chain. So I'm going to say forward. And we do this in the same exact way that we did before, with one deviation. So we hit new criterion. And in this scenario, instead of putting one prompt, we put all of them. So full physical, partial physical, and gestural. So we hit save and continue and establish the same exact criterion that we've got there. So in the interest of time, I actually want to show you guys, spend the next 10 minutes, and then I'll answer any questions that may come up here. So in the next few minutes, I want to show you guys, you'll hit the generate criterion, and then you'll get the same exact thing that you see right here, where we've got all of the steps available at once. So what I want to take you to now in the last few minutes that we've got is I want to show you some other really cool things we can do with the task analysis. And a lot of these goals that you're seeing here, kind of on the bottom ones, these other ones that we'll go through, these actually live within that same exact clinical manual. It's actually in the templates section. So if any of you wanted to use this as training for therapists, it's here in goal template samples, and it's this master ABA book. So for any of you that have used our sessions technician training or kind of been in implementation in the last year and a half or so, you would have seen this technician training, which is built off of this ABA book that lives in the manual as well. So set up to the nines, every instructional note's filled out. It has lots of behavior plans already in there. It's just meant to kind of give you inspiration on how programming can look. So I will open up the session. We'll talk about a few different ways. So the first question that we get is, how do we do, or what's kind of a unique way of setting up for toileting? So if I was to open up the toileting right here, give me 1 second. Cool. So if I was to open up the toileting, I can actually do this in a 2-tiered task analysis, because presumably everything prior to a bowel movement would be tracked much more than everything after a bowel movement. So if we're trying to train a learner to use the bathroom appropriately, here are all of the steps prior to when a bowel movement may occur. You may practice walking to the bathroom, unbuttoning pants, pulling down pants, lifting the lid and sitting on the toilet. But, the bowel movement may not occur all that often, which gives you the ability to log in right here, kind of check out this and say, okay, cool. Now I can track everything else. So what's really, really nice about this particular data collection, and I don't think we'll have time to go over this today in this one, but what's really, really nice is inside of the guts of the criterion, or inside of the guts of the graph, we have the task analysis option. So using the graph settings to show exactly what steps a learner is successful on. So kind of something to think about and play around with a little bit. So the next kind of example of something really cool that you can do with the task analysis is you can actually aggregate goals together. So if you're always running the same amount of goals, you can use this eyeball and you could say, you know what, I'm always running this entire deck together. And the reason I say always running the deck together is the task analysis is actually calculated by the number of steps that you're taking data on by the total amount that were independent. So make sure that if you are using this workflow and aggregating goals, that you have the therapist score everything. Because if I hit C at independent, it's actually going to be 100%, whereas, didn't actually track those. So a couple more things that we've got here. Here is color seriation, what this can look like. And what's really kind of neat is you can, for things like seriation and sequencing, you may want to know where are the stimulus control issues. My learner is consistently getting white and black, but getting light gray and dark gray incorrect. This is just kind of a prompt for the therapist. I've got this in a couple different places in this training, but you'll be able to see those. So what this is going to tell the BCBA in the raw data history is, stimulus control issues between light gray and dark gray. Let's do some mass trial there. Then flash forward, now they're getting all of them. So if you're constantly at that 50% data point, you know why. And it's a little more applicable when you have more steps, especially as you're getting more advanced learners for sequencing. So for something like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, same exact thing. You're running these all concurrently. Are they putting the cards in the right order? Are they consistently getting the middle ones right and kind of mixing up the gets peanut butter and jelly and bread and eating the sandwich? So you're able to see those. Now, probably the most robust option that we have here is setting up MultiResponse feature function class. Because as we all know, that's a pretty significant number of targets that you could be running. There are ways of aggregating them. Now, the example that I've got in this data sheet, and as a reminder, all of this information, at least all of these exemplars, are within that clinical manual that you could always reverse engineer and change whatever way you want. But I just have the appliances program. So feature, function, and class of appliances, and then, of course, an IntraVerbal transfer down the road. So I have my show me the appliance that has. I'm doing each of these in fields of 5. So if I've got, 4 other distractors, I'm like, show me the appliance that has a pot. Learner selects the coffee maker. I'm like, yeah, that's it. Awesome. So because I'm running these all in sets, I can kind of aggregate them here. Because if we're looking at this goal, that's 5 separate targets that we can embed together, especially since we're training the feature, the function, and the class. So you can always run these, one at a time, like, okay, I'm going to run this one, and then maybe I'm going to go to a function one and run that one, because these are all the receptive identification ones. But what's really, really nice, and just to kind of show you all 3 options, select the appliance, or select the one that's an appliance. So if you're doing the feature function class of community helpers, show me all the ones that are appliances, or field of 1. And just for good measure, right down at the bottom, I have the IntraVerbal version. An appliance, or a coffee maker, is a type of appliance. It has a pot and it makes coffee. So kind of that little prompt card for the learner. And the same exact thing here, because these are all the intraverbals. Tell me, tell me about the coffee maker, or tell me about a dishwasher, or tell me about a washing machine. So that is kind of all that I've got on there. I guess, sorry again for the delay of kind of getting here. Now we got computer all up and running. But just to reiterate, what we kind of went over today was I showed you guys the clinical manual. So that's all in here. It was in that chat window to download it. What we had gone through was the whole chains. Each step is on acquisition at once. So, gives you the ability to track all of them. We talked about the systematic prompt fading, where we're individually fading each prompt. The other option that's available there is to specify, do I want to show the highest level or all levels? And also, the last thing that we went through was how to set up with in-session prompt fading. So that was just giving the clinicians the autonomy that if they wanted all of the prompts available for all the steps, this is how you do that. So thank you all for attending. The next webinar is in 2 weeks, same time, same place, I promise. Same person. And I don't know if I actually introduced myself. I'm Nick Schreiber. I'm one of the ABA subject matter experts, but promise computer will be all up and running on that next one. And what that next one is actually about is setting up systematic prompt fading within the system. So same way that those task analyses were set up, it's just for regular goals, putting your prompt level one at a time that you're individually able to fade back. So thank you all again for coming, and I hope you all have a really great day.